See Gaieski on the left. Quick System Control 9-3 against Dan Fournier. He's on Is It Phoenix. This is a deck that you mentioned did put up multiple MCQ wins last weekend.
Yeah, this is a Phoenix deck. It was over the last 2 weekends. There was one on opening weekend for Richmond and one the following weekend. And the fact that it won both really caught my attention. I think Finale of Promise was the reason why it started doing so well.
Players underway here. Watery Grave into Drowned Catacomb for Gaieski. It was a basic mountain for Fournier. See if he can start spinning the wheels, cast some cantrips, try to set up some of those Phoenix turns.
Now, and interesting to note, Fournier actually has gone super heavy on the card Tormenting Voice, as well as 4 copies of Radical Idea. I know a lot of players actually trimmed a bit on some of the cantrips, but Dan just really going hard on them. 4 Tormenting Voice, 4 Radical Idea, and 4 Charter Course, all to kind of enable those 4 Arclight Phoenixes, while also just making sure that you don't flood or screw.
And he's getting to work. That turn 2 was Tormenting Voice, discarding Arclight Phoenix, so the writing's on the wall. He's building up to that. Another tapped blue-black land for Gaieski. No red mana yet, as his land was Watery Grave. He just passes back. No spells cast for him.
Yeah, one of the other new addition to the deck is Saheeli Sublime Artificer in the main deck, and that's just like a huge card to have in control matchups where it's a 3-mana threat that is relatively hard to deal with compared to your other creatures, and then also just gives you this stellar body.
Big turn 3 for Fournier. Charter Course discards a second Arclight Phoenix. We go to Gaieski. There's the red mana, Dragon Skull Summit. Nicol Bolas, the Ravager, showing up. Fournier is going to opt in response. Maybe looking for a third Phoenix would be the ideal find.
Yeah, third Phoenix would be great. Mostly he just wants to find something like Lava Coil to check the Ravager right now to make sure that A, it doesn't transform, and B, when he does bring back the Phoenixes, they can actually start attacking. If he has a pair of 1-mana instant sorceries to play on the following turn, as well as an extra land and a 2-mana, he can bring both of them back. So, ooh, and Finale of Promise, and this is one of the reasons why I like the card so much. It counts as all 3 spells cast, so here Fournier having a pretty huge tempo play where he gets to cast Opt and Charter Course and bring back 2 Phoenixes for 4 mana.
Yeah, he has 2 Phoenixes in the graveyard, and he gets these extra looks, maybe find a third copy.
Yeah.
Discard will be shock off that chart, but these 2 Phoenixes do come back. No attacks. Nicol Bolas is a 4/4.
Yeah, it would basically be trading 3 damage to put one of your Phoenixes back in the graveyard. It's not really where you want to be necessarily, but, you know. No, I mean, the Nicol Bolas, the Ravager, has done most of his damage with the discard, and it's going to take quite a few more turns before it can threaten to transform into a Planeswalker. I'm curious how Gaieski approaches the situation he's in right now, because those Phoenixes are usually pretty good against control decks. They need specifically an exile-type spell to get rid of them, something like Vraska's Contempt or even Cry of the Carnarium.
So the turn for Gaieski is just going to be Dragon Skull Summit pass. There is 1 Vraska's Contempt in his main deck, though he does have 3 Cry of the Carnarium somewhere in his deck. Just going to hang back that Nicol Bolas as a blocker for the Phoenixes.
Fournier looks like he has a pair of shocks. He's going to probably use one of those here in tandem with the attack to knock off the Ravager here.
Attack got a block, but the 1 Phoenix comes through. Gaieski to 17.
I think there's a chance Gaieski said declare blocks and was thinking about maybe killing the other Phoenix before damage. Yeah, there's a little bit of players playing it a little too fast.
All right, but it looks like it did connect, and now post-combat, Shock does finish off the Nicol Bolas. Fournier will Shock for a Steam Vents to 18, and Crackling Drake is the follow-up.
Yeah, that's a really good sequence from Fournier. Gives him a big threat in Crackling Drake, while also knocking off the Nicol Bolas, the Ravager. So, and he has plenty of cards in hand, so the odds of him returning that Arclight Phoenix that died in the block is pretty high, and I think that that's exactly where you want to be against control deck on turn 5 or 6, just having some sort of board presence that forces them to spend a bunch of mana on a removal spell, while also having the ability to continue that pressure on the following turn.
Gaieski did have that 1 Vraska's Contempt.
Good God, that hand!
And now we're going to Thought Erasure. That's a lot of spells. Opt, Charter Course, Radical Idea, Goblin Electromancer, another Arclight Phoenix, and a Shock.
Goblin Electromancer here is the standout to me. It's the most unique among these cards, but the third Arclight Phoenix obviously very strong, and Gaieski is going to have an uphill battle. He still has to deal with the Crackling Drake, and on top of that, there's going to be a second Phoenix coming down next turn no matter what he does, attacking him down to 13, and he's going to need 2 ways to exile those over the next few turns if he wants to stem the bleeding.
Yeah, it's a tough hand to break up. You were saying that third Arclight Phoenix, that's a huge deal, but your discard spell doesn't do anything to stop that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, if he takes Chart of Course, then Fournier can just go Radical Idea, jumpstart it, discard the Phoenix, cast Opt, and then bring back 2 Phoenixes, attack for 6. You know, if you take Shock, you know, it's not really doing a whole lot right now. Take Goblin Electromancer, maybe that slows him down a little bit. I don't know. This is a really tough spot for Gaieski.
Flexion ended up being Chart a Course. Gaieski will Surveil off of his Thought Erasure. Puts another Thought Erasure in the graveyard. That's a tough hand to break through. That makes sense.
Now here's an interesting decision. Fournier, if he plays Goblin Electromancer, there's a chance that his sequence actually gets broken up by removal spell and he's not able to get back all the Arclight Phoenixes. So I would actually suspect him in this turn to just go Radical Idea, cast Opt, or start with an Opt, that's fine. If he finds a land, he actually can do it pretty easily, I think, no matter what, but yeah.
Yeah, Opt is where he will start. And now he's going for Radical Idea. He's skipping the Electromancer, like you said.
Yeah, and I think that's smart simply because you just don't want any bad, like, you want all of your good things to happen this turn and basically bottleneck your opponent. And the only way that doesn't happen is if you cast Goblin Electromancer.
Yep. Jumpstart on Radical Idea, discards Arclight Phoenix. That's the third spell. 2 Phoenixes coming from the graveyard. Attack with both Phoenixes and a Crackling Drake. Crackling Drake currently has 9 power. Moment of Craving will take down 1 Phoenix. But we still have 12 points coming across after that 2-point life gain. I believe Gaieski ends up at 9 after all of this.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that sequence. So Gaieski held up 2 mana to be able to potentially Moment of Craving the Goblin Electromancer, but he also has an Ingress Rampage, which he could have used last turn to just deal with the Crackling Drake, and that Crackling Drake represented 9 points of damage this past turn, and that hits Gaieski for about half of his life total by itself.
He'll answer it this turn with Nicol Bolas Dragon God, but 9 life, definitely not a comfortable position, as you said.
Yeah, and Fournier actually has found Saheeli Sublime Artificer, so now if he so chooses, he can cast it, make a token, and actually minus the Saheeli on the token targeting the Arclight Phoenix, and the token actually gains haste and becomes a 3/2 flyer. So can potentially present 6 damage this turn with just Saheeli and a cantrip effect. Also has a shock, so he can put Gaieski all the way down to 1 this turn pretty easily. And if he has a string of spells, he can actually just bring back the other Arclight Phoenix as well. So.
Yeah, he's starting tapping 3. There is Saheeli. We'll see if he goes for the line you mentioned of making a servo, turning it into an Arclight Phoenix, which of course has haste. He's going to shock down the Planeswalker, make a servo. And yeah, he'll copy the Phoenix with the servo, attack for 6, Gaieski down to 3.
Yep, and it doesn't have the final burn spell in Lightning Strike to close the deal. Didn't have the requisite 3 spells to bring back Arclight Phoenix, but this is pretty darn good, and it presents a lot of different axes where Gaieski has to have multiple variable answers.
So Goblin Electromancer was played there. Ritual of Soot will take care of that, and Ingress Rampage will take care of the Phoenix. But Fournier does still have that Saheeli, and Gaieski had to shock to do that off a Steam Vent, so he's at 1.
Yeah, being at 1 here is not where you want to be. Any burn spell off the top, but Fournier's gone through almost all of his shocks, if not all 4. And he's not playing the version that I suggested where you have some number of lightning strikes, so his direct damage is basically limited to 1 more Finale of Promise in his deck. So at this point, he just needs to try to find a way to get back the Arclight Phoenixes, or potentially just present a couple of threats that Gaieski can't kill.
Well, here's 2 threats. Crackling Drake plus Goblin Electromancer. He'll pass to Gaieski. Nicol Bolas, make you discard a card. But then he will concede. That's just 1 blocker. So writing's on the wall. Daniel Fournier up a game in this match here. Is it Phoenix over Grixis Control?
Okay. All right. So we're going to take a look at the player sideboards here, try to get into their headspace and see how they are going to sideboard. Let's start with Gaieski.
Yeah, so 4 Legion War Boss.
That card is actually, for me, something that I do like to bring in against Is It Phoenix specifically. I didn't like it against Is It Drakes because it was much easier for them to establish a battlefield with things like Enigma Drake. Now, in this particular matchup, Gaieski needs to find a way to apply pressure because if the game goes super long, the card Arclight Phoenix is going to dominate him. And Legion War Boss might be that card that allows him to just play some removal spells and get the job done. Now, with that said, Fournier is going to leave in Lava Coil because of Nicol Bolas the Ravager, and he's going to leave in Shock because it's a 1-mana card and an instant for Finale of Promise. So there's a chance that Legion War Boss doesn't do anything, so I would 100% not blame Gaieski for leaving it out.
Yeah, we'll find out one way or the other. How do you feel about 2 Fungal Infection?
No creatures with 1 toughness, so leaving it out.
2 Moment of Craving.
Kills Goblin Electromancer and kind of kills Phoenix, but not permanently. I would be looking to get those types of removal spells out of my deck if possible.
2 Spell Pierce.
It can sometimes disrupt the Is It Phoenix opponent, and with them leaning pretty hard on Finale of Promise, Spell Pierce actually does have a good bit of value in this matchup. And also early on, you can just snag something like Chart of Course, which could stifle their draw as well as keep their Arclight Phoenix kind of locked in their hand.
Probably not an Elder Spell matchup.
No, there's not that many Planeswalkers. There's a couple of Narsets coming in, almost definitely a second Saheeli, but with Elder Spells more for the 17 Planeswalker decks, not the 4 Planeswalker decks.
Liliana Dreadhorde General.
The body doesn't fly. The minus ability usually tags Phoenixes. I don't love it.
Thief of Sanity, and that's actually the only copy in the 75.
I do like the Thief of Sanity, but it kind of falls in the same realm of Legion War Boss. If you bring in Legion War Boss, I would also bring in Thief of Sanity, but depending on how you want to sideboard, you could either bring in all of them or leave them all on the sideline.
3rd copy of Duress.
Absolutely. This is definitely a good Duress matchup. It hits a lot of the important cards and just strips overall resources from the Phoenix opponent. Makes it really hard to triple spell sometimes.
And for Fournier, 3 Legion War Boss of his own.
Yeah, I like more threats in this matchup. Gaieski has a ton of removal and is likely bringing in more. It's a different type of threat than the other ones that you're presenting, and it gets in on some particular turns that Gaieski might not be quite prepared for. You know, he casts like a Thought Erasure on 2, follows that up with something on 3, and then Legion War Boss can come down off a top deck thanks to finding it off a Radical Idea or stuff like that. You generate a body sometimes immediately, and that 1/1 occasionally gums up the works for the opponent because then they can no longer cast Nicol Bolas the Ravager, or sorry, Nicol Bolas Dragon God, and minus it without it dying to that 1/1.
Right. 3 Shiva on Fire.
Not really a lot of creatures to tag, but after game 2, if he sees 4 Legion War Boss and the Thief of Sanity, might want a couple more of those shock type effects.
3 Entrancing Melody.
A little too expensive here. That's more for the white weenie decks. The decks with a lot of really cheap creatures.
3 Negate.
I like some number of Negate, but you want to be really proactive in this matchup. Every time you bring in a counterspell like Negate or Spell Pierce, it makes Finale of Promise that much worse. And a lot of the creatures, or a lot of the cards on Gaieski's side that are threatening are things like Nicol Bolas the Ravager, which Negate does not hit.
2 Narsets.
I do like Narset quite a bit. Provides you another Planeswalker that your opponent has to deal with while also giving you some card advantage, and kind of shuts off any little incremental card advantage type things they might have.
Extra copy of Saheeli.
Definitely want that. Now, Gaieski's build doesn't have a lot of sweeper effects, so I do like Saheeli Sublime Artificer a lot. It basically overloads their Vraska's Contempts or Ingress Rampages.
Right on. So, currently Fournier is up a game here. You've been playing a lot of Is It Phoenix, so they deck like Grixis Control. Let's say you were playing it at Star City Games game night. Would you be comfortable being down a game in this matchup, or do you think that things might just go Fournier's way?
Oh, I'm 100% thinking it's going to go Fournier's way, or should we say Fournier's way?
For Queen and Country, I know Dan Fournier, really a patriotic Canadian.
Yeah, I thought that was British, though.
Well, yeah, I know.
Oh, but they really like the Queen, right?
Everyone loves, yeah. They are a British
I don't
Commonwealth,
like the Queen.
I'm being
told.
told.
No offense.
They were. I think most countries that were liberated from Britain are not fans of Britain in a general sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
But anyway, you can get for Queen and Country tokens and sleeves at Star City Games game night near you. Find locations at go.starcitygames.com/game night.
Yeah, those game nights are a lot of fun. I don't want to compare them to F&M, but that is the kind of what they're being modeled after. Just a night where your store owner can invite a lot of people to come play a tournament, and you can win unique prizes that you can't really get anywhere else. SCG Game Night has always been one of my favorite things that Star City does. As someone who grew up in a town where there weren't a whole lot of comic book stores or LGSs, we didn't really have a Friday night gaming night. We had Wednesday night gaming night, and so every time it was ever called Friday Night Magic, I was always like, it's not though. It's Wednesday night.
That's just a lie.
It's just a lie.
Players looking at some opening hands. Fournier has kept 6. Looks like 7 cards for Gaieski.
Yeah.
Gaieski will be on the play. He'll start with a tapped Blood Crypt.
It's interesting. He has a couple of duresses he can play, choosing to wait a turn, so he gets a little more information, and also can potentially tag whatever card that Fournier left on top of his deck with that Scribe.
Yeah, so we'll get a look on turn number 2 here. Sees a Negate, a Radical Idea, a Chart of Course, a Narset, a Legion War Boss, and an Island. 2
cards that stand out to me. Negate is unique in that it can stop some really important stuff, and then Narset is potentially annoying as well. But Easy Gaieski going for all the card draw here, taking Chart of Course to turn off potential Arclight Phoenixes, as well as the Narset, which is potentially problematic on turn 3.
Yeah, second duress took down both of those cards. Fournier plays the Island and passes. See if maybe Gaieski has one of those 3-mana threats here.
Oh, he's shocking.
For Steam Vents. Yeah, he's at 18. But it's just a pass. Radical Idea instead for Fournier.
Might be threatening a Bedevil. Might actually have, a spell or two to play here. Have to wait and see. Radical Idea from Fournier just kind of cycles, but the threat of it later on, counting as another spell cast, is important, and also as a discard outlet for Arclight Phoenix also is good.
Just Steam Vents go for Fournier. Not going to attempt that War Boss into that shock. No action for Gaieski. On his turn, he'll play a tapped Blood Crypt. Instead, Fournier will jumpstart that Radical Idea, discards a Lava Coil.
And he's just looking for some action here. His hand is probably really reactive, and he just needs to find some way to get things going. Looks like he found a Phoenix, and this is something that I really like doing in this matchup, is just casting Phoenix. And then if your opponent ever kills it, then you play the 3 spells to get it back.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, and the Phoenix does connect the first time here. Gaieski to 15. See what he can do about it. Dragon Skull Summit, Nicol Bolas, Dragon God.
Yeah, this is a good one here. Gets to tick up, draw a card, and forces Fournier, who is low on resources, to either exile one of his lands, his Phoenix, or a card from hand. So a really tough decision for Fournier.
And we still know about a Negate and a Legion War Boss in hand.
Now this is a spot where I am likely to pitch Negate because the time for Negate is gone. It stops a removal spell basically at this point, and that's it. And in those scenarios, I want to be able to just cast all my stuff immediately, but Fournier valuing that Negate a little higher than one of his lands right now, which is, not a bad thing.
Yeah, goes ahead and exiles Island. Will go back his way. He'll deploy the Legion War Boss, get a token for that. Looks like both attackers are going for the Planeswalker. Nicol Bolas down to 1 loyalty.
Now this would be a really good spot for something like Cry of the Carnarium, and with Gaieski having 3 copies in his main deck, I have to imagine that it's in his deck after sideboard.
Starts his turn with Duress. Sees a second Arclight Phoenix, a Chart of Course, and that Negate. Yeah, an inkling of Negate versus Chart of Course here is your take?
I feel like Chart of Course with the Phoenix represents something that might be able to dig Fournier back into the game. And this is assuming that Cry of the Carnarium is about to be cast, which I'm like 90%. There it is.
There it is, and Chart of Course was taken. So leftovers for Fournier. He has that Phoenix in hand, and a Negate that gets exiled by the plus on the Nicol Bolas.
Yeah, now Fournier desperately needs a land so that he can attack that Dragon God. Doesn't find it, and this is just going to run away with the game because it's basically a +2 cards every time it ticks up, it's just brutal.
Yeah, Liliana joining the party as well. What can Fournier do? He can concede. Everything's all tied up here.
Yeah, that early mulligan coupled with 3 duresses and the Nicol Bolas Dragon God just really threw Fournier off balance, and the Dragon God really just hammered him.
So we saw Fournier. He had those War Bosses in his deck. He was on the draw there. You got to figure they're even better on the play. Do you think that on Gaieski's side, there's anything going on with that stuff on the play versus the draw? Or do you think it mostly is just matchup dependent entirely?
I think it's mostly matchup dependent. A lot of these cards are just generically good in some matchups and bad in others. Although they're like you mentioned, though, Legion Warboss is significantly better when you're on the play as opposed to the draw.
And Fournier had them on the draw. You certainly got to expect he'll have them on the play. We saw those negates for him. The mana wasn't great for them, so he wasn't really able to capitalize on having those counter spells.
You also saw what I was talking about, where he had negate and it was just kind of rotting after Ethan had already established a battlefield. Once he already had Nicol Bolas the Dragon God, negate no longer is a card that matters anymore. And ultimately, him keeping the negate over the land ended up meaning he couldn't cast the Arclight Phoenix, and that ultimately snowballed and lost him the game.
Whether you are just tuning in or you've been watching us here all weekend, thank you very much for watching us here on twitch.tv/SCG Tour. And if you are so inclined, we really appreciate it if you would subscribe to our channel.
Yeah, same, because there's a Roll Todd emote, and you can have it if you sub, and it's dope.
And some other benefits on top of the Roll Todd.
Yeah.
You get to vote on the quarterfinal. We'll be coming to a top 8 pretty quick here. Custom emoticons and badge, the Roll Todd, that's one of them.
Yeah, that's the one that matters the most.
That's true. I got nothing, no comment.
Look, we just need a coffee one for you.
That would be nice. Just a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
No additional context.
Right. And it's just black.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's black, and also like there's no steam effect, so it's clearly been sitting there a while. But you can get to that subscription for $4.99 a month, and we would really appreciate it if you would.
Yeah. On top of that, well, I don't know if I'm supposed to bring it up, but I know here on the SCG Tour during the weekends we do have sub-only chat, so it does unlock access to that as well.
Got to keep it civil in the chat room.
Yeah, I mean, there was a discussion a while back when we switched to it, and the question was never whether or not it's going to be sub-only or not, or open chat. It was literally no chat or sub-only chat, which I am wholeheartedly in favor of.
Yeah, the two good possible options. Players shuffling up for game number 3. Fournier was on a mulligan in game number 2. See if we can get some nice 7-card hands.
All right, looks like it's going to be mulligan, yeah. It's never great against the Duress, Thought Erasure, Nicol Bolas the Ravager deck.
Right. The important is just making you discard cards. You were playing a lot in Theros Standard, yeah, with Black Devotion and Thoughtseize. I had
2 Grand Prix top 8s with Black Devotion.
That ain't bad.
No, I haven't had a Grand Prix top 8 since, so it's not good either.
I think that's the format that I strategically chose not to mulligan the most often.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a hand that's like 5 lands, 2 spells, you know, a lot of times you just keep in the dark, because if you get hit with a Thoughtseize, like, you just don't want to have fewer overall resources. Meant top decks mattered a lot, but also meant the enter the battlefield tapped scry lands mattered a ton.
Yes.
They just helped smooth out your draws, but also was your splash colors and protected you from those really powerful Thoughtseizes.
Gaieski on a mulligan here as well. Going to be Vancouver mulliganing.
Yeah, honestly, I want to see how the new mulligan rule affects the line of mulligan affects standard and limited, because I watched a little bit of it for the Mythic Championship, you know, and mostly it was how I saw how it affected limited, and it looked pretty good.
Huge fan.
Yeah, same. I'm really curious how it affects standard.
Players looking at 6 cards here.
Now, Fournier's hand looks dank.
There's a nice mix there.
Multiple Legion Warboss, 2 lands, Tormenting Voice, so he's got a nice little curve going. Gaieski looks like he's got a 1-lander with a couple of copies of Duress and a Search for Escanta, so he's looking for a blue mana source here. Watergrave would be perfect, because he could go turn 1 Duress and turn 2 Escanta.
Both players scrying. Looks like Fournier putting an Electromancer to the bottom. Gaieski's got a Blood Crypt. He'll shock for that. Go to 18 and Duress.
That's not a blue source, but it is a land. And when he's keeping a 1-lander, any land is better than no land.
So choices are Tormenting Voice versus Saheeli, and he sees a mountain and 2 war bosses.
Yeah, he's going to take Tormenting Voice here. I might have actually leaned on the Saheeli. even though the Tourney Voice basically he's trying to see if he can keep him from hitting his third land drop, and that's sometimes it's good to do, especially when you're behind. He's kind of in desperation mode because he kept a one-lander, doesn't have blue, so.
They got the Tormenting Voice last turn. He dresses now. Oh, is it Guildgate? Wow.
Why is that in your deck? Fournier, you're fired. Read my article. What are you doing?
Not playing well, but Gaieski has no third land, so here's a War Boss. Does he have something for it? He does not.
Never punished.
It all worked out just fine. And land missed again for Gaieski, which is somehow worse than a Guildgate.
Now if I'm Fournier, I don't play another creature because Gaieski's missing lands.
Yep.
He's likely has like a Cryocarnarium or just some more expensive card in hand. So you want to just kind of sit back, wait for him to deal with the current status of the board. If he kills the War Boss, play another one, or play the Arclight Phoenix. If he clears the board, then you play another big thing.
Yeah, and you're respecting Cry of the Carnarium is what you're getting at. And Gaieski definitely has one in hand. Fournier is just going to keep making these tokens, going to mentor them up. Gaieski was at 12. He's going to attack for 7. He'll go to 5.
Never punished, ever.
Finds a Steam Vent, so he could shock the 3 to Cry, but then he's just going to die to this Arclight Phoenix that I have spotted in Fournier's hand.
Yeah, I think we all saw that one, including Ethan Gaieski. Writings on the wall. Bad luck, my friends. But sometimes you gamble on a one-lander on a mold of 6, and that's what happens. Unfortunately for Gaieski, Fournier takes it down, even in the face of that crucially bad is it Guildgate.